In this video, I give you an update on Oathsworn Into the Deepwood as we are on Chapter 15 out of 21. But before we get into today's video, just want to share with you what the GGGGs are for this month. Each month, Bob the Beholder picks some of my Patreon supporters to receive gratitude gifts. And for this month of April of 2023, we have a $50 credit towards Terrainify. They create STL files available for purchase for terrain, or they can print one out for you, or you can get one printed and painted and flocked. If you haven't seen my video, go ahead and check it out here, and you can see all the awesome products that they have. We also have two $25 credits going towards LV427. They make really unique sci-fi terrain, and they've also provided a channel code to provide a discount for your first order from them. Use the links below in the video description to go to their website. And we also have this Starfinder Pirates of Skydock board game. And then finally $100 to go towards a crowdfunding campaign, which my Patreon supporters are currently voting upon. Go ahead and use the link to go to my Patreon page to find out more information, as we might be updating that list as the month goes along. So this video is going to contain spoilers, as I'm going to be showing off my painted miniatures for the bosses up to the 16th or 17th level. I only have 3 miniatures left to paint out of the entire set. Editing Gaming Geek here, just making an interjection. I did actually manage painting up the last 3 models, so the entire set is painted up. In between the time of my original videotaping and then the release, I went ahead and just decided to finish up all of the painting so that I can show you the entire set. So I did add the last 3 bosses, stuck them in towards the end of the video. They're not included in the shots of the entire set, but I do show them at the end. But I'm going to be starting off with just my updated review after playing through 2/3 of the campaign, and I will give another warning before I show those miniatures. But right now I'm going to be sharing with you, after playing up to Chapter 15, what my thoughts are. Also, if you haven't seen my original video where I compare this game to Kingdom Death Monster, make sure to check that out, as many of the things that I pointed out in that video are still relevant. So really the update is that this game is as good as you've been hearing from a lot of other reviewers. And I stand by my original review when we first started 7 months ago into this campaign, that one of the best things about it is the storyline. So the world that the setting is in and what happens and the choices that you have is pretty significant. Every single time we make a choice, I always wish that I could read in the quest journal what would have happened if we would have chosen the other way. But that's incentive to go ahead and play through this game again, because the story is that gripping and interesting. Sort of how you're navigating yourself through this world is really unique. Now, one of the things that I was wondering about is that the narrative is somewhat linear, in the sense that regardless of whatever choices that you make, you are going to fight the bosses in a particular order. There is no sort of skipping of bosses. There isn't a reorder of how you encounter them. But sort of, if you want to think about it this way, the storyline sort of branches out like this, but then comes back to a point when you have a boss battle. So that starts over again where you have different choices, but it always comes back to a point where you're fighting the boss. So it really isn't a kind of thing where there's this narrative tree where if you make one choice, you're going completely in a different direction than if you were to make a choice this direction. So you're constantly coming back to the same point, but it takes into consideration what kind of allies that you have in the party, the decisions that you're making regarding those allies impacts where the storyline is going to go, or what kind of information that you have. And the other thing that I haven't been disappointed in is each of the story phases that are in between the boss battle has been really unique, with a unique way of solving puzzles and encounters and what happens in the world in general. You really feel invested into what is happening and your involvement with the destiny of these different towns that are in the Deepwood. And it is a little bit shocking what happens, as this world is grim, dark, and brutal. So some of the decisions that you make similarly can be really brutal as well. And some of the puzzles, even though they are really difficult, I'm looking at the Deepwood, traversing the Deepwood and needing to sacrifice compatriots that are along with you on the ride because you run out of food. There is sort of difficult decisions that you're making throughout, and there isn't a simple, well, I'm going to always choose the right thing or the morally correct thing, because oftentimes you can't just pick that because there's bad consequences either way. So I really like that about the story, that it is pretty deep and it isn't sort of morally childlike. It's pretty complex. There's a lot of gray in the decisions that you have to make. There isn't an obvious one because there are ramifications for any choice that you make. So I really like that. That's super engrossing. Again, the storytelling and the app is excellently done. And overall, I just love this game. Our group that's currently playing, we all really like this game as well. A couple of them are asking whether or not they can borrow this game after we're done so that they can take their friends through it. So overall, Oathsworn really has lived up to its reputation as being a premier campaign experience. And in many ways, I would say that I do prefer playing this game over Kingdom Death Monster. Even though, as I said in my previous video, the two games are different enough that I'm keeping both of them in my collection. But the overall experience of the game is such that I would pick this game, playing this game over Kingdom Death almost at any point. Now, one of the things that I was a little bit disappointed by, and this is a little bit of a nitpick, is that the difficulty level of this game has been relatively easy, even though we notched it up a level with potential permadeath, as well as starting off with only 5 hit points rather than 6 per hero. I've found that we haven't failed any of the boss battles. One of the reasons might be because we have the witch in our party, and I feel like she's overpowered in terms of her capabilities and her ability to screen off and nuke the enemies with fireball, all that kinds of stuff. Maybe we're playing her wrong, but she just feels totally overpowered, particularly for some scenarios where her abilities just seems to decimate the enemy. But overall, I think the people that I'm playing with, they don't mind that the game is relatively easy. It's still complex in the sense that there's a lot of strategy, and how you play your skill cards it's a puzzle. But overall, I think, again, we haven't failed any of the boss battles. I think through the course, we've had 4 knockouts of our heroes. So maybe if we had a different combination of heroes, the game might have been a little bit more difficult. But in general, it's been a super positive experience, and all of us have been looking forward to playing it again. And I have been waiting to get to that chapter before opening up the box because I want to be surprised too. But the week before we play, I'll go ahead and open and paint it up and have it ready for our boss battler. So in my previous video, I did show a painting technique, which now is being called slap chop, I guess, which I've used for most of the smaller individual figures. But most of the larger models, I've just spray painted either black or dark brown and had more of a traditional painting style on them, just because it's faster to do that than using all of the contrast colors. So again, this is your final warning. Go ahead and turn off this video if you don't want to see the bosses. And I will go in order so that maybe once it reaches to the chapter that you're at, you can stop at that point. So if you are leaving the video, please go ahead and hit the like button and subscribe. Again, check out my link to my Patreon page to see what the GGGGs are for this month. Otherwise, happy gaming. We'll see you next time. All right, so this is the Broodmother, which isn't a spoiler because I think most people have seen this one, and I did show this in my first video. Really like how she turned out. I actually ended up using the dip method, where I used wood stain, polyurethane to cover over her, and I think that had a really good effect on her overall. And I did find out later that some of these do make a reappearance where you do fight them later with higher level AI cards and damage cards. So, because there isn't 21 different bosses. But here are some of the minions I decided to paint them 3 different colors, and again did the same method, dip method with them too. Next up is the satyr, and he was relatively easy to paint. Just spray painted him all black and then did a dry brushing of this blue over him, and then just painted up these parts. Look at that prisoner on there, that's awesome. So really happy with how he turned out. I did have to go back and repaint his eyes orange. Originally had them yellow just because to fit the narration. And that's one of the things that I found out is that, you know, I'm using basically their cards to try to figure out what they should look like. I did stray from some of the cards with other monsters, but found out later that they had an ability or something I didn't quite account for the narration. But really like how he turned out as well. He is a really tall figure with this staff that he is holding, but I think he turned out awesome. Here is the worm, super unique. I just love how different all of the bosses are. This guy comes in 3 different parts, and I made sure to just put a gloss in the mouth so that it was shiny compared to the rest of his body, which is matte. And just, yeah, I just love these details of where he is cut or wounded as they are fighting, and just this dynamic of how these parts move across the board. This guy was super cool. Spray painted this all dark brown and just dry brushed over it. Was super quick to paint up. So next up was the Scar Tribe. Now when I opened up this box, I was a little bit disappointed with all of these miniatures needing to paint up basically 5 individual miniatures, or 6 individual miniatures, because these take a lot longer to paint than one big monster like the Broodmother or any of the other previous ones. But went ahead and used the same method, basically the slap chop method, and these guys are just as detailed as the heroes. So painting up 6 more of these was a little bit of a challenge, but ended up again thinking that these sculpts are so amazing and so detailed that they are actually fun to paint up. And a lot of details on the bases too, which I am really impressed by. Now, the boatfly is the first enemy that I really strayed from the paint scheme, because basically he's white and I thought that was a little bit boring. I did paint up the minions, which are sort of like maggots. I did paint them up a whitish color with light blue wings. But the boatfly overall, I just thought would be boring as a light white color. So instead I used this paint, this color shifting paint, which for the life of me I can't remember what the name of that is. And I think it looks way cooler and looks like an actual bug, because there's a lot of wasps or beetles that have this iridescent color shifting color to them. And I just love this color scheme way better than sort of this bland white, and think this guy turned out awesome. I mean, this guy was fun to fight because the thought was so disgusting of having these maggots popping out of you, infecting you, and all that kinds of stuff. So I just think this model turned out super well. So the unknown horrors, they look the most alien to me. And the details on them are awesome. Now these guys I painted black and just did more of a normal brush over them with these blues and purples, and I think they turned out really cool looking too. Super gnarly looking and scary. They're like nightmarish. But again, these were quick work with some dry brushing, and they turned out cool too. The Venerator was happy to see it was just a single figure, pretty quick to paint, especially compared to the Scar Tribe, and I think he turned out looking pretty cool. Was able to get some script on his book, which I use actually a pen, a really fine point pen, to do that kind of work rather than a paintbrush. And then I didn't use slap chop on him. I actually did layering of different colors for his cape. And overall, I think he was super quick to paint up and looks really, really good. Alright, here is the mollusk, and I think he might be one of the heavier bosses to fight. And this was the kind of case where I went ahead and sort of painted him up, trying to mimic that, but didn't quite realize that he was slimy. So after the fight, I went ahead and put a gloss coat on top of him, not realizing that he was supposed to be shiny. And also put some green around these holes, as I didn't realize that he was spewing out poison as part of the battle. But he was super quick to paint up because it was, again, a dark brown, and just randomly put color on him and then just dry brushed him with a light tan, and it just turned out this way. And then put the green on, which again just emphasizes his poison ability. Also put some gloss down here at the base so that it looked like he was sliming a trail behind him. And again, just look how different all of these bosses look compared to one another. So it was really fun to paint up all of these. So here is the Forgotten King. Relatively easy to do all of these characters because they are all wooden and had just a dark base brown and dry brushed on top of that. So not too hard to paint up these guys. Did this yellow and orange. And then here are the two dogs. That again, not super hard to paint up these guys either. So the Shadow Man, I was a little bit disappointed there was no 3D models for this. You're actually using tiles, and the tiles are actually really hard to see on the board. So I ended up just proxying some of my ghoul miniatures from Dungeons and Dragons to represent these guys. So a little bit disappointed that there weren't any actual miniatures that came with this character, and it was just 2D tiles. And then we opened up another box of more Scar Tribe. So another, so here, actually it's 5, not 6. I think I grabbed the Spear Woman from this set. But these guys, I mean, look at this guy. This boss looks so cool. Again, use slap chop method for him as well, using contrast colors. But these sort of barbarian type guys look so good, and they take advantage of the 40mm or whatever millimeter these things are. Look at these guys with these scythes. Totally awesome. And this is where I sort of wish I could use these miniatures for other games, but because the scale is so much larger, it's not like I can proxy these in. The base is large to, I think, 32mm bases for all of them, so I just can't use any of these for any of the other games, which is a little bit unfortunate. But they look awesome in the miniature case. I was glad that the next miniature was just a single figure, and this is Marcella. It comes with this optional fire base. Doesn't really have gameplay mechanics to it, but I think is sort of cool thematically to be able to have set her in here. In my gaming group, the character who plays the witch is now using this because he thinks this looks so cool with his character, which is awesome too. But she was relatively easy to paint with, again, using the slap chop method and contrast colors. Alright, so here's another case where they painted an insect a white and didn't like that, wanted to make mine much more colorful. So here is the Wandering Queen, made it a lot more colorful than sort of the bland white that was there, and all these disgusting egg sacs on her abdomen, which is so awesome. But I just wanted to add more color than just that plain color that you saw there. And then here is the minions, sort of a similar color, but for these smaller guys. I sort of wish that these spiders had more than just the 2 eyes in the front, which typically spiders have more than just 2 eyes. But overall, minions look cool as well. And I just used colors that so far aren't in any of the other monsters. So I strayed a little bit from what was on the card. But looks good. Here is Rubio, which I really like the yellow tipped daggers that he carries around. And he was relatively quick and easy to paint up, as his card shows him sort of like an assassin with dark colors, so basically matched it up a little bit there. So it looks really good. So here's a card for the Ogre of Thrace. And again, the colors are a little bit nondescript, but I did try going for this color. So tell me if you think I succeeded in that. Spray painted him black and then decided to splotch him with some purples and some violets, and then did a lighter pinkish color for his exposed skin on these various parts. So to be honest, I'm not 100% happy, even though it looks pretty close to what's on the card. I might have chosen to do a multicolor for this guy. I don't know. I'm not 100% sure. But by this point, I was sort of, you know, needing to get these done quickly, so I started just painting as quickly as I could. But this guy looks pretty cool, nonetheless. So here are the final 3 miniatures that I managed to paint up. So I'm just interjecting this into this part of the video. And these 3 aren't going to be in the final shot where I show everything. So the first one is the Chieftain, which is our friend, the leader from the tribe, as he is resurrected. And he looks really cool with this sort of mutated arm that's bluish. Pretty much painted him up the same way he is on the card, and was relatively easy using the slap chop method for that as well. Next up is Aurelia. Now here's what's super interesting about Aurelia. She is totally not the right scale as everyone else, and is more a standard 28mm scale. And I think it's because she's on the stand, but it does look a little bit funny that she is so much smaller than all the other figures. Used a different method, didn't use slap chop, basically just spray painted her black and then just put paint directly on top without doing a zenithal brush highlighting underneath. And I did that for a couple of the other models that were darker. No use doing that, taking advantage of the black underneath. And she looks pretty cool too, sort of floating up in the air, makes her different. And then finally, the Mad Dreamer. Let me zoom out because he's so big. He actually wasn't that hard to paint up either, because with a lot of these models that have, I don't know, natural colors, basically I spray painted him with a black. Usually I use dark brown, but it doesn't really matter. And then put in the major colors in each of the different blocks and sections. And then I did a dry brush of this really light ochre green, mixing up a little bit of green and gray, light gray together, and just dry brush the entire thing except for this section here and the eyes that are this magma color. And was pretty easy to paint up, and then just kept the base a different color brown and didn't highlight. That way it just differentiates the model from the base. Decided to add a little bit of purple throughout the model just to add color variation, and then green for whatever these bumps are for different growth, and then this sort of burgundy brown, reddish brown throughout. So he was actually really easy, quick to paint up. So as the final boss, I think he turned out pretty close to what is on the card. I think the card there's more grays, but looks pretty darn close. So looking forward to fighting all of these bosses, and think they turned out really well. So here are all of my painted miniatures so far. I think there are 3 more bosses left. 2 of them are sort of smaller human size, and then it is the larger final boss. So I only have those 3 left. So this is most of the painted miniatures that you're going to get in the set. I do have all of the minions over here in this tray holding them, and being able to sort of paint these piecemeal rather than trying to get all of them done all at once actually worked out really well, because I wasn't rushing or trying to get these done as quickly as possible, but was able to spend some time each week before the next gaming session in order to spend a little bit more quality time thinking about ways that I wanted to paint it, or maybe do it a little bit differently, or modifying them after the battle when I found out some specific things about them that required some adjustment. So overall, super happy. I think these miniatures are some of the best quality miniatures and detail that I've ever used, and a large part of that is because they are at a larger scale than most other 28 or even 32 millimeter miniatures. So it just makes it such that they have a lot of detail and they are super fun to paint. So maybe this inspires you to go ahead and paint up your miniatures. Remember, a poorly painted miniature is better than an unpainted gray piece of plastic. So go ahead and dive in. Use a number of my other tutorials to inspire you and show you how easy it is to actually get paint onto these models. So hopefully you're having fun with your Oathsworn set, and we will see you next time.